Hi, sorry. I'm sure that looked wild. We are going to talk about how to identify and understand academic articles. So, the very first thing we're going to start with is by looking at this Jones article. This is about online engagement. What does it mean? This is like a teaching kind of an article. Like, what does it mean for you as a student? So, we're going to get rid of this. Okay. So, relationship between undergraduate student performance, engagement, and attendance in an online environment. So I can look at this here and I can see that it was published. I'm just recording it, so I want to be sure. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit goober. Okay. This was published in 2022, which is relatively recently. We would say anything in the last 5 years is pretty recent. We also do want to look at when they got their information, but we will take a look at that. So we are looking for academic articles that have some sort of test subject in some way, some kind of a sample, and they also have some kind of a methodology. So I'm going to go through and look at this one. I actually didn't really look at it. Okay. So I'm going to start here. Monitoring student is common practice. However, in the midst of studies, okay, here we go. Statistics derived from student interaction with a virtual learning environment. Canvas is a monitoring tool. So he's going to talk about how to use this. I hope he really does it. But anywho, we're going to go through, I say he because it's Thomas, but I don't really know. So we're talking here about how to actually read the articles. You can read the literature review, the introduction, if you want. I would probably use it. I probably wouldn't read this one because I kind of have this idea already about like, okay, yeah, we did transition. I'm kind of informed on this area. You might be, you may not be, but I want to show you to tell you that that part is only telling you what other people have said. So they're not giving you any new information. All that is the literature review or the introduction is telling you what other researchers have found. So that's kind of like a, well, she said, he said, and that's not really where you're going to get data. Now, if you see something in here that you really like, for example, let's say, ooh, peer-led inquiry, then I might go and look up for Farrell in 1999, but I'm not going to focus on this as data. This is not new data. I would need to look at Farrell, Wood, Seymour, whoever, if I wanted to look at this as information. So let's see how they're doing this. So as an undergraduate course, volcanology and geohazards, that's kind of fun. 31 students that are sophomores in the undergraduate program. Okay, fine. Some were enrolled in a master's program. No age or ethnicity data is available, so we don't have much demographics. So that's fine. So who are we surveying? Who are we learning about? We're learning about from one class, volcanology. So it's already kind of specialized. We already know it's kind of specialized. We can draw some basic conclusions here. It's in Liverpool. It's not, um, from multiple sources or samples, and it's using Canvas. And so it may not be applicable to people who use Blackboard or any other sort of learning management system. So here's the course environment in 2021 for 12 weeks. Okay, we can look at all this. That's fine. Um, blah, blah, blah. Okay. They're showing you just how they're supposed to, how they interact with this site. Available to students using Canvas. The web browser on any device, so it's generally acceptable, shows you how it's linked. So here's the data collection. 3 types of data were collected: synchronous attendance, student grades, and access to materials on Canvas. So we want to see how they measured this. Attendance was recorded for all sessions, and this was matching Zoom profile names to the class register. Their grades were a measure of performance from the quiz and the essay exams, and then and to compare it, they used average grades from that class before. Then access to the Canvas, measuring access is from a tool that's provided on Canvas, and it lists the number of resource views each week. So they looked at the number of students that accessed each resource once, the total number of resource for each student, and which week did they access that as a resource. And then they could look at exactly what they're watching, and it's based on every 30 seconds. So they can tell you which parts people are zooming in and in or moving in and around. And then it tells you what it can't see. Okay, so that's where we are with how this study is set up. So what would you do if this was what you were using for your research? Well, we need to get it down to the nitty gritty. We don't want to have a whole file full of articles that we don't know what they contain. We don't need to be reading constantly. You can see how much I skim when I'm reading. So here's where we want to look at these 7 points. So what is the motive? Why was the research done? Okay, I should probably read that part. So we go back here. That is actually either in the abstract or it's in the introduction. Common practice. Okay, so all previous studies on engagement and attendance have been for in-person. As we transition to online, we have to reevaluate what constitutes engagement. Fine, good. That's a good motive. So you would write on this portion, you would write statement indicating why it was done. So what's the reason? Engagement and attendance has traditionally been measured in person, and shows a positive effect, but we don't know anything about online, and we're mostly online with COVID stuff. Okay. You can get it down to fewer than 10 words. What do the authors want to know? They want to know, and we saw this, if you can assess engagement using the Canvas tools. If engagement based on the Canvas tools is connected with higher grades and higher performance. Perfect. That's all we need from that whole part that I just read. So we want to look at the main conclusion. So this is going to be based on the objective. They want to know if these tools on Canvas are able to show you what you want to know. So now I'm going to go down to results. As shown in the course syllabus, each week had a unique set. Very few students went back to check their answers on practical activities. Portion of online proxy performance comparisons were made. I don't know if it's assuming an equal weight between the S and the quiz. Okay. Now, here, what are they showing? The proportion of students that are accessing the material, and then which type of material. It's the number of students out of 31. Oh, I see. The number of students, but they might have looked at it more than once. Okay. So then they're going to do right here, they're saying that when it comes to this, there's no real connection between the attendance and page views, attendance or page views and performance. So then we want to go back through, keep reading, highest number of views on week 6. Their quiz grade based on attendance, the people that had high grades, did they have high attendance? Here's low attendance, low grade. So we want to kind of check out how that's aligning. We would almost expect it to align literally in a line, like a clustering. So right here, we have people that are doing very well with less than half of the attendance expectations. We would really expect to see a line going this way. And so we aren't quite we're seeing more of a random distribution, particularly here, their overall grade and attendance. There are a few clusters, and we want to know a little bit about that. So that is what you're describing when you look at this. He's describing it long, but you want to use the actual words, right? So you would say, or numbers, I'm sorry, no correlation between the quiz grade and the mean weekly page views in the first 6 weeks. You would want to talk about how week 6 had the highest number of views, week 3 decreased, and mostly people are looking at PDF. They're mostly looking at the lecture slides, and then very few, or very rarely are they looking at the lecture videos. After week 6, the drop in the number of views decreased significantly. And you can see some of this here. No, the responses are used to constitute. So then they start to talk about how to effectively monitor. What does it mean? Blah, blah, blah. So you can look through all of that. And that's going to give you this answer, the main conclusion. What did they find? Well, they found that you could measure engagement through page views and attendance based on the Zoom, but that students mostly looked, week 6 was the highest, week 1 was the second highest. It dropped off after week 10. There didn't seem to be a linear pattern between attendance or engagement and scores in the class. And, all of that stuff that we just kind of talked about. You want to give the numbers. So they decreased significantly. How significantly? The most views were in week 6. Well, how many is most? How most out of how many? So you want to give those values. Then you're going to say, that's going to be your biggest one. This would probably have maybe 3 sentences. Then the implication here is where we're going to say, actually, I'm sorry, just disregard that. The main conclusion would be a straight statement based on the objective. So the objective would be, can Canvas data tools give us information about engagement and its connection to success in the course? Main conclusion, Canvas data can give you the information, but it doesn't seem to have a connection between engagement and course view. What does that mean? It means that we either need to change the way we're doing it, or, and he talks about this implication in his conclusions. So then we look at the support. This is where, I apologize, where you're putting in the 6 weeks, where you're putting in the drop in page views, where you're talking about the nonlinear model that we see. So what would people say? Why would they say that this is wrong? What would they say is wrong with this? The easiest place to find this is, honestly, we all put it in our stuff because we have to, but mostly it's going to be that you only looked at one class one time. But here you go, small sample size right there. There you go. 31 people. So yeah, of course you want to look at this on a larger scale. Now, it didn't qualify how many times they viewed the lecture video, just whether they had viewed that time segment at least once. It didn't say if it was 3 or 4 times. It said at least once or 0. So you have a limitation on those types of things. So then here it's the work together. So if one student is logged in, it may not show that they were attending, but they might have been. So this is where we're really talking about some of the weaknesses, and that's going to be your counter argument. But what do people say in response to that? And that's going to be your refutation. When people say in response to that counter argument, small sample size, you don't have a real good measure if they're working together or how many times they view, this is what they say, right? They say right here. The key message here remains true. Login or page viewing is not sufficient to determine attendance and engagement with online materials. So that can't be how we're measuring or using what we're using as predictors of success. That's their refutation. They're saying, regardless of all of these weaknesses, it still shows no relationship. Yeah, do it again for sure. It does show, but it still shows no correlation. And this is in contrast, with numerous studies that have this is in contrast with in-person classes. Then they start to kind of give some example, falsely registered, blah, 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 right? That you might be on Zoom, but not actually there. You might click on the page, but not read the content. That kind of stuff is not showing the same value or information. It's not giving you the truth of their engagement. So then they give you some statements past that point, right? What do we say after that? But we only care about that support, the counter argument that's saying why this is not a great statement or why this was wrong or why this was weak, and the refutation that says, regardless, you can say what you want, but there was nothing else to study. Like nobody else had this. All of these, except for the support, are probably going to be fewer than 10 words. Everything else, like that would be fewer than 3 sentences, though. That's where you're giving the data, the numbers. So that's how we're going to review articles. We're going to use this 7-point system. Now I can take this and put it into No, we on Chat GPT some days. Look, it's even on my most remembered. Please use this article summary model. Summary model. Sam to summarize article by Thomas. Forgot his last name already. What's your name? Jones. By Thomas Jones. So then I'm going to put in my favorite little, and then I'm going to put in Thomas's particle. I'm going to show you how wrong this is. Select all. Help me out. Help me. I just select all. Why? God, why? Okay. So I take this article. And actually, I could probably just tell them the article. Oh, yeah, I don't do that. Relationships are not a by Tom. No, just copy. Be stupid. Just copy. Oh, do this one. Do you like watching old people suffer through technology? Because it's painful. Mm. Thomas Jones, which was called what? Voila. Okay. So we can look at this here. What was the motive? I told you to use fewer than 10 words. This is copy and paste from their article. What you would say is, all you would say is, we know about attendance and engagement in person, but since COVID, we don't know about online. You need to summarize. This is too formal. The objective is to see how it reflects attendance and engagement. So we're seeing if the Canvas metrics of engagement, which includes page views or whatever, correlates with success in the course or on exams. What they found is it wasn't. And so when you say weak positive correlation, that's a like red flag of AI to me, because that's not a term that we use statistically. What is the implication? This is too much. This is too much. We need a different way. That's it. We need a different way to measure it. The word underscores, for the love of all things holy, that is absolutely a red flag for AI. Now here, the support, this is using the literature review, and that's inaccurate. We want to look at the numbers. None of this is useful. You want to know what 6 weeks they had the most views, they had this, and then that's how we're showing that there wasn't, and then the line wasn't, that there wasn't a linear relationship between them, etc. The counter argument, these are okay, but that's not really what he said. What he said was that the limitations, or the counter argument was that maybe you can't guarantee their engagement despite their clicks, and that it was a small sample size. So then what do you say? Well, this here is too much. What did he say? He said, yeah, you're right. You're right. But we need to find a better way. If this isn't right, then let's find a better way. And so quickly, this is how quickly AI will screw it up. Most of this, yeah, that's not okay. That's okay. That's okay. No. Implication, maybe. No. No, no. So when we talk about using these summaries, you might could do this, but it's not going to give you the information you need. What I want from the SAM summaries is that you show me that you read it and you understand it. Because when we get to what I expect you to actually read, and I have a million articles set up. I don't know if I have them all posted yet, but we have tons of articles set up that I expect you to be reading, and you just simply aren't going to want to read them in such great detail. So the SAM article summary is going to make it quick and easy for you. I took a long time on that because I was trying to navigate it and explain it and do it aloud, but you actually will be able to very easily do this and do it very quickly. Now, I want you to notice on these examples, these are from a forensic criminology magazine, or not magazine, journal, excuse me. They would not want to be called a magazine. So this forensic anthropology journal talks about like the science of criminology, or forensic anthropology, or forensics criminology. I can't remember. So the first is, where can you get the best DNA sample on documents? And the second is body decompetexis. So this is the first article. This is all that I'm asking you to do. This is me reading that article and my actual SAM summary of it. Do you see how short that is? This part here is all made up, but this part here is how you would write it. You don't do this on your SAM summary, but when you go to write papers, this is how you would use it to write it. And that's on both. So you won't actually need to do that. This is all that I'm asking for. And then here is what you could do if, right? When you're writing a paper, that's how you'll use it. And I'm telling you all of this because when you go to write your papers, the A, or write anything, the A number one thing that I see and I will say to you is to use data or quantify if you're used to my classes. And the problem is that you'll say many, some, occasionally, few, increase, decrease, but you aren't telling me the increase, the decrease, the sum, any of that. I want those defined. I want to know how many is some, how many is few, how much was the increase? What do you mean um, they occasionally? How often is occasionally? I want the numbers. So for you, when you're doing these assignments and you're reading for them, you must use the data. And that SAM article summary will be the quickest way for you to get that data. All right. So I will let you go from this one. And I might do another one. Let's see how long I last today, right?